Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. It's my pleasure to welcome you to today's e-broadcast, Fire Up Cross-Company Breakthrough Innovation. My name is Leo O'Connor. I'm a Vice President of Global Research in the Technical Insights Business Unit of Frost & Sullivan, and I'll be your moderator and also one of today's panelists. During today's presentations and panel discussion, we'll post live polling questions to gauge your reaction to what we have to say. When you see the polling question, simply use your mouse to click on the answer that best suits your opinion. And at the end of the e-broadcast, we'll take a look at the polling results. Now, you'll need to disable the pop-up blocker on your internet browser in order to view and participate in today's polls. So please take a moment and go to the Preferences option within your browser and turn off that pop-up blocker. At the end of the panel presentation, we'll ask our audience to participate in a brief survey and evaluation of the program. So please click the link on the URL that will appear in a pop-up window towards the end of the e-broadcast. After the panel presentation, we'll conduct a live question and answer session. You can submit questions at any time during this event by using the message panel in the lower portion of your e-broadcast screen. So use the interface on your screen to type questions, and we'll get to as many of them as possible. Additionally, all registrants for today's program will receive a $250 credit voucher towards any upcoming Frost & Sullivan Executive Mind Exchange. And someone will be in touch with you in a few days to help you redeem your voucher. Today's program will be available on demand by visiting www.frost.com/partnership so that you can share our program with your colleagues. Now, before we get started, let's take a moment to look at today's agenda. I'll begin with a description of how co-innovation differs from other forms of innovation, and I'll also introduce some of the discussion points for today's presentation. Then you'll hear from Rich Duncombe, Senior Strategist at Hewlett-Packard Company, and David Matheson, Co-founder, President, and CEO at SmartOrg. They'll discuss how co-innovation lets you leverage partnerships to dramatically grow your company with reduced risk. After the e-broadcast, SmartOrg will stay on for a few minutes to demonstrate the best practices presented in this e-broadcast. Now, this demo may inspire some improvements in your own organization, so please stay with us for that informative discussion. With that said, let's start today's presentations. Now, those of us who work in high-tech industries hear a lot of excitement about open innovation, but it's highly likely that more projects that yield commercial products fall within the definition of co-innovation. And hence we ask the question, is co-innovation the new open innovation? Well, according to traditional definition sources, innovation is the introduction of something new, a new idea, a new method, or a new device. But when you try to look for definitions of variations of innovation, such as open innovation and co-innovation, you run into challenges finding definitions from the official sources. But of course, there are plenty of blogs on the topic, and according to one source, in open innovation, you'd have a clear need specified. You'd go out of your enterprise boundaries to get those needs fulfilled, and you'd expect the solution to be ready or semi-ready. Now, in a recent Frost & Sullivan survey about the major challenges encountered by people doing new product development, our preliminary results show that most companies do not even have a formal open innovation group or staff. With co-innovation, on the other hand, it's about building up an idea together with people that are external and internal through real-time collaboration, and this is very common. Alternatively, with the lead customer approach, some prospective customers have pressing needs that may eventually be widespread in the market, and they're likely to act on those needs ahead of the rest of the market. And how they solve these challenges informs innovation projects. One thing we notice involving both open and co-innovation projects is that they tend to focus on breakthrough rather than incremental innovation. Now, here we take a look at the collaboration continuum, from transactional agreements to strategic partnership on to joint venture and M&A. And our thought leaders will speak about this in more detail later. What we found is that the majority of innovation projects fall within the universe of strategic partnership and joint venture. Strategic or co-innovation partnerships refer to any relationship between separate companies that involves shared contributions, ownership, and control. And they work best when each participant seeks to augment its existing capabilities with the resources of the other, creating a synergy that enables the organizations to deliver a unique offering that they couldn't provide on their own. So in sum, they grant a company access to new capabilities that allow it to become more competitive. Now, in today's competitive marketplace, it's nearly impossible for an organization to achieve its growth objectives through organic growth alone. If executed successfully, co-innovation-based partnerships can deliver access to new markets or customers, it can accelerate new product development cycles, and improve a company's competitive positioning. They can help companies expand their capabilities without the added step of creating those capabilities in-house, and companies therefore perform more efficiently and adapt more quickly than they would on their own. So given these advantages, it's no surprise that strategic partnerships are increasingly a centerpiece of corporate strategy. Many companies commit more than 20% of their assets to developing and managing partnerships, while others depend on partnerships for about 30 to 50% of their research expenditures or annual revenues. And a Frost & Sullivan survey underscores this trend. It says that more CEOs cited strategic partnership as their #1 growth strategy than any other strategy, and it eclipsed M&A, geographic expansion, and other traditionally favored strategies. One example of the value of joint ventures in the United States comes from the former National Institute of Standards and Technology, ATP program. At a point in time during the Advanced Technology program, NIST calculated that the absence of this program would have resulted in the loss to the United States of $1.86 billion in product revenues, $115 million in cost savings, and $1.3 billion in additional R&D, as well as 133 patent applications. Now at this time, I want to take a moment to allow our audience to answer the first polling question. And it is, what do you want to get out of co-innovation? Access to new markets or customers? To accelerate new product development cycles? Improve competitive positioning? Expand capabilities without having to innovate alone? Perform more efficiently and adapt more quickly? All of the above or none of the above? Now simply use your mouse to click on the answer that best suits your opinion, and we'll be taking a look at the results of our polling questions at the end of the presentation, so please stay with us. Now please remember that the pop-up blocker must be turned off in order to see the polling questions. So moving along here, today we'll share some insights with you using the platform of a real-life co-innovation project involving Shell and HP. Shell and HP recently announced a breakthrough in the capability of their jointly developed inertial sensing technology to shoot and record seismic data at extremely high sensitivity and at ultra-low frequencies. According to a VP of Exploration Technology at Shell, the collaboration with HP demonstrates Shell's strategic approach to driving innovative technology solutions through active partnering. We'll hear soon from Rich, who is the senior strategist at HP mentioned on this page. Meanwhile, Wall Street analysts are saying that Shell is a leader not only in cash flow generation, but also in technology development. It turns out that the seismic system uses the breadth of HP's technology development capabilities, as well as Shell's advanced geophysical expertise in seismic data acquisition systems and operations. And as such, this collaboration builds on the core strengths of each company to advance technology in this field. And with that said, I'd like to hand it over now to Rich Duncombe, the senior strategist at Hewlett-Packard.
Thank you, Leo. I appreciate the opportunity to be with the group today. I'm a senior strategist at HP, but also the commercial lead for this co-innovation program that we're going to talk about today between HP and Shell. Before getting into that case specifically, I just wanted to share a few more thoughts from my perspective about how HP uses co-innovation. Co-innovation projects are deep engagements, and we use them primarily to solve what I would call transformational problems or go after a market disruption. So even beyond incremental innovation, we're really looking for the big wins. We're looking for cases where HP's capabilities combined with our partners' market knowledge really just fundamentally change the trajectory of a market and leave both HP and our partner in an advantageous and sustainable position going forward. And as Leo mentioned, it is a shared risk and benefit and investment model. Today I'll specifically discuss a co-innovation program between HP and Shell focused in the area of seismic technology, and the core is to expand Shell's technology leadership in oil and gas. The seismic acquisition program is really one of the most exciting programs I've worked on in my career. And this model that we're pursuing is really driving together, I think, a best-in-class approach, bringing out the power of both our companies. The vision for the seismic acquisition program is to disrupt the seismic acquisition market from a 30-year incremental improvement cycle to a much steeper curve. This graphic here shows some folks actually interacting with this 3D seismic data that the system will be producing. So the current seismic systems, just to paint the picture here, really are based on analog geophones. So those are essentially voice coils that have been perfected to sense the seismic images. And those are connected together with cables. And so for large surveys, you will end up with tens of kilometers of cables between the geophones and between the various sensing units. These systems are bulky, they're heavy, they require massive crews, in numerous cases in the hundreds, to operate these surveys. This picture here just shows just simply the cables laid out to support a relatively small survey. It's only around 10,000 channels. And so you can imagine when we start discussing surveys of 100,000 nodes, for example, what kind of complexity we'd be getting into. In contrast, the HP and Shell vision is a wireless system that will support up to 1 million digital sensing nodes. And this is a game changer. The focus is to increase the data quality at a number of levels. First, the aerial density, so essentially think of the pixels of what we're able to image increase dramatically based on the density of our deployment of these sensing nodes. But it's just not possible to scale up the weight, the volume, the size of the crews, and so we needed to create a breakthrough, in a number of areas, including the operational efficiency, how many people would be required to actually deploy surveys of this type, the weight and the transportability of the systems, and really the resiliency as well from a reliability perspective, because the cable systems do suffer from something called cluster failures, which can be a very significant problem. You can lose major portions of the data. So we're looking to address all of those areas and take the technology to a completely different level. At the heart of the system is really a micro electrical mechanical system device, a MEMS device, which HP has developed and in partnership with Shell has adapted for the seismic industry. This small MEMS device, which you can see held in between a couple fingers here, it's the world's most sensitive inertial sensor, and it operates at very low power, which is essential because These are battery-operated wireless systems. Just to give you an example of how sensitive this device is, if you were to put this sensor in the middle of the continent of Australia, you'd be able to sense the vibrations based on the wave action on the shores of the continent. So this device is really sensing at the very noise floor of the Earth, and this allows tremendous image quality. Consistent with the co-innovation story as well, this leverages HP's MEMS facility, which supports our world-leading inkjet business. So here's an example of actually taking a core asset from HP, which has been critical to creating our inkjet business, and leveraging that to a completely different application to solve a key business need for our partner Shell. The co-innovation, this co-innovation project, and as I said, most of the ones we embark on are all about creating a market disruption. But the journey of any innovation project, and of this one specifically, really can be quite a difficult path. And so just as an example, in this case, this project actually started with a canceled project called Atomic Resolution Storage. After that, very advanced technology was canceled. One of the leading researchers from HP Labs realized that the micromover stage, which was used in this ARS project, could be operated in reverse. In other words, it could sense movement rather than create movement. Another significant milestone in this journey was the publication by one of HP's senior fellows of HP's vision in sensing, and this was published in the Harvard Business Review. This paper describes the central nervous system for the Earth, where HP laid out a long-term vision about how machine-to-machine or widely distributed sensing networks could be used, and I'll talk about that a bit more later. We started to hone our commercial strategies through a series of workshops, which David will discuss later in the presentation, and that led us into this co-innovation program with Shell. We are not all the way to the market yet, but this specific case really highlights some of the key success factors for this project, and I believe for other co-innovation projects, and I'd like to share those with you today. I've broken the success factors into 4 areas: internal, partner, value creation, and market disruption. First, internal success factors. Shelter the project from internal metrics and processes. There is no formula or recipe to start a new business or product category, and the same is true for a co-innovation project. The only chance to be successful is to shape the organization to the needs of the project. We formed a unique internal program structure crossing 5 HP divisions, a first for HP as far as I know. In some ways, that has made it obvious that this is a unique program, and it cannot conform to rigid sets of processes or metrics. And this has really worked. We've had actually very few escalations internally outside of this program structure. The second internal success factor may sound more like a partner factor, but it's actually something that we needed to do internally, and this is to banish supplier and procurement thinking. Partnerships for co-innovation will not fit into an existing business model or organizational approach. In the co-innovation project with Shell, Shell made the point numerous times early in the relationship that they weren't interested in just buying engineering services from HP. And so we needed to challenge our own internal structures and thinking to make sure that's not the way we were presenting ourselves or engaging with the client. Alternatively, we also pointed out to Shell in cases where it looked like we were being moved into a procurement process, set up to manage more of a commodity purchase. And I'm convinced that neither of these approaches would have allowed us to create the technology breakthroughs to transform this industry. The second area are really the partner success factors, and these are things that we developed together. Have the tough conversations up front. We completed our key agreements in about 4 months when we launched this project, which is impressive. But really more impressive was the fact that I felt that we hammered out and got alignment on many of the tough issues, all the tough issues we were aware of at the time, funding, our roles, intellectual property, and so on. So we established very early on a precedent to get the tough issues on the table rather than think that they might go away, and also work these issues face to face. This has been a key to our success so far. The second partner success factor, and I show two of our engineers working in the field together with the project, is perhaps better stated as creating a powerful joint decision-making. But I use the term negotiate based on principles because, in some cases, any of these discussions could be thought of as negotiations, not just the business terms, but technical specifications, funding, schedules, resource commitments, and so forth. These are all joint decisions that need to be managed in an effective way. And we've created a culture where the joint team in this co-innovation project really thinks about the best interests of the program first and then considers the needs of the two companies, and this is a key. The final success factor is to never overestimate your knowledge of your partner. Now, there's tremendous compatibility between HP and Shell. We both have proud technology brands, great people, and a history of making a difference. But despite these apparent similarities, we come from different cultures, industries, and have different competencies. I have personally fallen into the trap of assuming I understand my colleagues. These are dangerous assumptions and create numerous problems if allowed to go unchecked for too long. I strongly advise that some of the key team members really co-locate early in the program to spot these communication gaps before they create misalignments or more serious relationship issues. This is actually a photo from the team meeting in Corvallis, Oregon, and one of the key leaders from Shell has been just completing a presentation. So we've really spent a great deal of effort to keep the teams aligned and communicating top to bottom. The third category of success factors are value creation. And the first one is that every decision needs to improve risk-adjusted value. For a market disruption or a disruptive technology opportunity, characterizing the market value is a difficult task. And I have found over time that teams can get very fixated on these financial analyses. But the reality is that risk is actually as significant or more significant in many cases than those early financial calculations. So risk has to be an equal partner in the decision-making of how to move the program forward. I give Shell a lot of credit because they insisted on naming Phase 1 the de-risking phase, where both teams explicitly identified both technical and commercial risks that we felt we needed a much deeper understanding of before we moved into the actual development. It is healthy to hear the words risk and value discussed on a regular basis by everyone in the program because all of our job is to improve the risk-adjusted value. The second value creation success factor is to communicate your vision, prepare the market, and build your brand. In the many businesses I've had the opportunity to launch with HP, I was always taught keep everything a secret and sort of capture the market by surprise. And certainly in some markets, like consumer products, that's the way to go. That's not true when you're trying to shift an industry, where many companies can either align their business models and strategies to join the partnership or be left with no choice but to compete. Communicating the vision early in the industry has accelerated our collaboration with other companies. This slide shows a string of announcements all the way back into 2009 where HP announced this inertial sensing technology and followed on with the partnership announcement with Shell and then next some key proof points, test results that we were able to achieve together. So we've had a very deliberate and intentional process of communicating our progress to the market. In addition to the market advantages, this approach has very much resonated with our corporate brands, and it's been picked up as proof points to our brand promise. Last year, there were some very favorable reports, for example, about Shell, and really giving them credit for this seismic co-innovation program because it was seen as a key example of Shell's commitment to technology leadership and to building partnerships outside the energy industry. The next group of success factors are around market disruption. Not all co-innovation projects have the objective of a market disruption, but as I mentioned, HP and Shell's very much looking to shift the seismic industry. In the energy industry, it's widely recognized that technology will be one of three primary drivers for meeting the energy demand of the future. And so this co-innovation program with Shell couldn't be more aligned with that vision. We're bringing forward here, as I mentioned, new-to-world sensor technology, sensing node, low-power communications, software. We couldn't be better positioned with respect to creating a market disruption driven by technology innovation. The corollary in the market disruption area is that the overwhelming cause of failure for new businesses are commercial issues. Teams face many technical commercial obstacles while launching a new business. The key difference is that technical teams are designing within a set of constraints, which they largely control. In a closed system, if one performance attribute is not meeting its target, then it's possible to resolve this issue by moving the constraint to another part of the system or adding compensation, for example. Conversely, commercial issues face a different dynamic. For example, the existence of this co-innovation program between Shell and HP has created a chain of unpredictable reactions in the seismic industry. The commercial strategy must predict how the landscape will change and select the optimal position. Shell and HP have partnered on the commercial strategy from day one because we know this will be our ultimate test. The final success factor is, I would call, one of those big corporation paradoxes, perhaps. On one hand, failure is it's simply not okay. We didn't get to where we are as major corporations by failing. Failures may be tolerated, but they're not celebrated, which can create a constant ratcheting down of the vision to minimize risk. Yet when a project falls into trouble, and it will, it's precisely the power of the vision that drives creativity and passion to solve the issue. The vision for the seismic acquisition program is to disrupt the seismic market from a 30-year incremental improvement trend to a much steeper curve. Above this project is HP's vision for Sense. This is a vision for decades to come to develop large sensing networks that will help people manage our resources, security, and infrastructure. Put simply, playing small increases the risk of failure, not the opposite. It is my hope that these success factors will contribute to the success of the opportunities that you are currently leading. Thank you very much, and I will now pass this back to Leo.
Oh, thank you, Rich. And now it's time for our second polling question. What is your potential for co-innovation? How big is your version of the HP Shell co-innovation? Is it 5 million in new revenue, 10 million in new revenue, 50 million in new revenue, 100 million in new revenue, 500 million in new revenue, 1 billion in new revenue, or 5 billion in new revenue? As a reminder to our participants, you may ask a question to any of our presenters using the lower half of your e-broadcast console. We will get to as many questions as we can during the panel discussion towards the end of today's program. And now I'd like to hand it over to David Matheson, who's a co-founder, president, and CEO at SmartOrg. David?
Thank you, Leo, for having me. Great presentation, Rich. I've been on a journey since early in my career when I worked at Xerox PARC, which very famously failed to deliver on many of the major inventions we're benefiting from now. Laser printing, which they did get some benefits from, the workstation and user interface, which they pretty much didn't, and networking, which is, collectively these things have completely changed the world. And I have seen that many of the failures in innovation generally and co-innovation more specifically come because of failures in thinking through how it's managed or in the business process. That is, a compelling customer need and a great technology is necessary but not sufficient to change the world. And I think you can see that in Rich's comments about the commercial failures and having to go the distance and really being committed to making it happen. So I've developed over many decades a model here for co-innovation that I think gets at the major steps that these elements go through. The first phase, ideate, is about finding committed innovators. I have a little bird analogy going here. That's about finding the birds that are really going to build the nest and bring up the new offspring. A next phase, formulate, is often overlooked. This is about really understanding and mapping out your uncertainties and getting agreement between you and your partner on what is the golden egg you're really going to go for. Formulation is actually almost never done. It's a perpetual process of reformulation. The next phase is incubation, and this is about taking that egg, learning, adjusting, and proving out that opportunity, here hatching your hatchling. And of course, a hatchling, while it's clearly a bird, is not ready to soar, and so the last phase is an acceleration phase, which is about growing up as a business and ultimately becoming a large-scale business, which you're all trying to accomplish. So let me start with ideate. Ideation is about finding the committed innovator. Machiavelli, I think, has a great quote on this point. He says, "There is nothing more difficult to take in hand, more perilous to conduct, or more uncertain in its success than to take the lead in the introduction of a new order of things. Because the innovator has for his enemies all those who have done well under the old conditions, and lukewarm defenders in those who may do well under the new." So while ideas are clearly part of ideation, it's a misfocus to not look at the people who are going to go the distance, the people who are willing to get bloody noses, and the ones who are willing to change the world. That is, the birds who are going to build the nest. I think Google has said this most clearly. There's a wonderful quote from Alberto Savoa, who's a serial entrepreneur and currently at Google, because there's a big trend of idea management systems, as if just collecting all these ideas is somehow going to get you moving forward. Alberto says, "People think ideas are the input to the process. This is wrong. Ideas are the byproduct of the committed innovator." So look for the people when you look for ideas, and figure out who's really willing to take something and make it go the distance when you try to find your partner. The next phase I call formulation. Of course, it's also a reformulation, and it's about aligning on a learning plan. You see, when you and your partner come together, there are many, many possible eggs that you could work on hatching. You've got different interests, there's a lot of uncertainty, and you want to find that golden egg that you're really both committed to nurturing and developing. Now, formulation has been pretty well written up by Frost and Sullivan, who recognized this formulation step as a best practice and wrote this up. And I'm going to give you a little overview of some of the major elements of this. You can also see a webinar or download a version of this guidebook at www.smartorg.com/HP guidebook. Let me start with an example from Sprint, because I think it gives an overview of what innovation or formulation is about. Sprint views innovative ideas as being like ships, and they're going across the oceans, and they don't really know exactly where they're going to wind up. And the thing is that the ship could actually take some pretty significantly different routes or different business strategies that are going to take them through the technology development through commercialization. Within each of those strategies, there are some key necessary actions that are required to demonstrate the success. I call these proof points. And finally, each strategy has its prospects in terms of net present value and those things are highly uncertain. And understanding the uncertainty behind your economic evaluation is critical to navigate and steer the ship. So as a quick example, here is something they called real option strategy development, but it's about laying out with your partner the major choices you make and identifying what your major directions are. So this particular example is about a system that uses cell phones to track children for parents. This is a product that's now pretty well on the market, but it was not on the market at the time this work was done, or not very strongly on the market. It was an idea more. They face decisions around who the customer is, whether they're aiming for consumers, for example, or whether they're aiming for businesses, that is, and do some kind of reseller arrangement. The brand could be new brands, co-brands, white labels. Are they developing a service that anybody can use, or are they trying to develop a service for Sprint to use? Channels could appear in different places, everything from Walmart or direct business-to-business sales, and or exclusively through Sprint. Who's going to be involved from the carrier point of view, and features, and so on. What tends to happen with groups is that each subgroup optimizes the decision in its own terms. So if you are a brand manager, you're going to pick the brand that's the best. And if you're doing channel, you're going to pick the best channel. And the problem is that the combination of the best in each column is very rarely actually the best strategy. And so the act of laying this out with your partner and understanding your choices is really critically important. Now here they combined the individual choices in the columns into integrated strategies, from a low budget to a grand slam to a low risk. And these combine different decisions into a coherent business play. They then pick a plan A, that is a primary one they're going to proceed on, knowing, of course, full well that it may not work out, and they'll have to fall back to plan B or C. But the strategy table gives you a framework for communication, understanding each other's choices, understanding each other's capabilities, and coming up with an approach that's going to win. To illustrate a point about uncertainty and economic evaluation, let me give you an example from Inspire Pharmaceuticals. Now, as this visual metaphor indicates, often the two partners get jammed over a key issue on some kind of project, fundamentally because they have a different opinion about an uncertainty or what something is worth. In this particular example, they were developing a drug that had some questionable IP, and IP is very, very important in this industry. But it wasn't bad IP, it just wasn't perfect. And so there was a group of supporters who would basically get political control and advance the project. And then the detractors would become afraid, they would mobilize political support, and they would stop the project. And back and forth, it goes and then it stops, and then it goes and then it stops. The project was basically stuck. And this issue of IP was looming like a banging noise in the attic that you think the worst. And so what they decided to do was to map out the impact of this IP uncertainty on the future of this project, and in so doing, also look at it in the context of all uncertainties. So they worked through the impact of factors like market share, market size, and for each one of these factors, they assessed a range of uncertainty based on what they knew and didn't know about the situation, and including IP. As this next chart shows, you can see all the factors down the left of the chart. Across the top is a scale of NPV, which is a figure of merit for a business case. And you can see there's a vertical line there, which occurs when all of the values on the left go at their middle value. The next thing they do is they do a sensitivity. For you engineers, it's called an input-output sensitivity. And they take an input like peak market share and they move it to the low value, and you can see that the NPV drops. And then they try another one where they move to the high value, and you can see that the NPV goes up. In this particular case, the impact of the uncertainty for peak market share is by far the biggest. The other ones, costs and so on, really don't matter as much in terms of what needs to be proven out for this project. So this peak market share issue became the focus of the attention. This has moved them away from the uncertainty about the IP, which turns out not to be a top uncertainty. And by exploring the market share issue, they find out this has to do with market segmentation, and so they make another delivery mechanism for the product, basically making it available through children, through the use of an inhaler, and that gives them the opportunity then to get patent protection around the inhaler-drug combination and renders the whole problem moot. Basically, before they had been arguing over the wrong uncertainty because they didn't have a way of understanding which ones really mattered. And so this mapping out of the future of your contingencies, your strategies, and your uncertainties is critical in this formulation phase. And then putting that together so you have a learning plan for how you're going to go about solving this, what Rich and Shell called the de-risking phase, having that explicit and having that planned. Of course, this is a perpetual process of relearning or reformulation because you always learn new things. So once you've got a learning plan going, you can move to the incubation. Incubation is about delivering on proof points, and the objective is to hatch your precious golden egg and get a bird. Now, this distinction about proof points requires making a distinction between proof and work, and I have a good example here from HP. HP, at one time in the early 2000s, had this vision: make the ATM of photo printing. They had a fabulous printer that could shoot out 4x6 prints very, very quickly, and they were going to put kiosks around in cafeterias and corners where you could just walk up with your camera and print this stuff out. Fabulous idea, very cool machine. They had a great prototype. Now, if you go ask people on that team at that time what the biggest source of risk was, they would say supply chain. It's very difficult to set up. It's very complex. This system requires very high reliability because it's going to be an independent kiosk. And so it's a huge source of schedule and budget variance. And they're right from the sense of work, but not really from the sense of proof. See, HP is world-class at developing supply chains. It needs a lot of work, but it doesn't need a lot of proof. The fundamental proof in this idea is the behavior change. That is, will someone encountering a station on the street pull out their camera card and hit print? And at the time, that wasn't known. So getting evidence on this de-risks the project and moves it forward. So what you do here is you saturate an area with prototypes, possibly using not the machine you're ultimately intending to use, and which is a headbender for HP, was at the time. But by saturating an area with prototypes, then you get evidence about what people will really do with the system, which is the underlying assumption, the underlying thing that needs proof. Now, what they encountered when they did this is that people won't change their behavior. So that's a big problem. And here comes the reformulation. Because in this exploration, they had also talked to stores and about where stores would like this in their environment. And what they found was that the store owners loved the print engine, but didn't like the kiosk. And so what they found is that they needed to change the design and repurpose the technology so it would deploy into a different kind of commercial pattern. And I think this last quote on this slide indicates pretty well. Just chop off the head and add an Ethernet, and I'll write you a check. So ability to formulate, reformulate through this learning plan as they deliver on the proof points. That's what incubation is all about, that exploration and adjustment. Once your hatchling is around, the next thing you'd like to do is move it and help it grow up. And many companies take young businesses and they crush them by putting relentless P&L pressure on them. And so acceleration is all about a phase for dealing with the sort of business adolescence. Adolescent businesses need adult challenges, but in a safe environment. So as I said, they need P&L discipline. It's actually good for little businesses to get this, but without the crushing pressure that's going to force them to overinvest or take shortcuts or whatever. They require a lot of flexibility to adjust. They have a lot of awkward issues that need to be worked through. I mean, they may not have their production system built up to go to scale. They also need clear metrics that help them transition from innovation-oriented thinking to full P&L accountability. But the key is that it's a transitional element. And only when you get through this do you achieve that soaring bird and have a real scalable business that you can treat with your traditional metrics. So in summary, you need an ideate phase that's about finding the birds who are going to build the nest. Who in your organization and who in your partner's organization are going to be the committed innovators that are willing to go the distance. Second, you need to take time to formulate the project, and in particular have multiple formulations and look at multiple uncertainties and possibilities. Map it out so that you and your partner know what golden egg is you're trying to go after. The result here is an aligned learning plan that's going to guide future phases. And this, of course, will have to be reformulated as you learn. Next step, incubation, which is about delivering on the proof points and making those adjustments and reformulating. And the result is a proven opportunity, the hatchling, if you will. Finally, the accelerate phase is about growing up, dealing with business adolescence, and converting that hatchling into a soaring bird of a scalable business. Now, if I bring this back to HP's journey, it's been one, and most of what Rich has talked about is one of incubation and reformulation. And I've mapped some elements of Rich's slides onto this process so you can see how this works. At the top there, you can see their announcements. HP announcing a new sensing technology in November is really the beginning of their formulate phase. HP and Shell developing collaboration is kind of the end of their formulate phase. Incubation in March, they announced test result that's delivering on a proof point. If you look at their overall milestones on that arrow towards the bottom, the canceled atomic resolution storage is really the beginning of the ideation. They find the inertial sensor, and when they get this HBR article, you can see they're beginning their formulate phase. The formulation phase and the reformulation has been executed through a series of interactive workshops that has really gotten them out. The first sensing business workshop at the end of their formulation phase. Launch of the sensing business is occurring in the incubation phase, and they're continuing on to incubate and deliver on additional proof points. And I don't think they yet have a hatchling, but they're on a very good path to get one. So this is the sort of process that HP and Shell have used, and I think it's one you can use to deliver on your value that you see in co-innovation. And with that, back to Leo.
Well, thank you, David. Now it's time for our third and final polling question, which of course relates directly to the main points of your presentation. What part of your process most needs improvement? Is it ideation, finding committed innovators? Formulation, aligning on the learning plan? Incubation, delivering on proof points? Acceleration, growing up? All of the above, or none of the above? And at this time, I'd like to ask our audience to take a brief survey to evaluate this program. While you're providing your feedback, we'll be reviewing the results from our polling questions, and we'll spend some time answering questions from the audience. Well, we've had some great questions come in, so please stay with us for the Q&A session, and then we'll have the Q&A after the polling results are reviewed. We'll begin now by reviewing the polling results, and let's see what the results were for question number 1. You'll remember it was, let's see, we have here, what is your potential for co-innovation? How big is your version of the HP Shell co-innovation? And the clear winner here is 5 million in new revenue, followed by 10 million in new revenue, and then 50 million in new revenue. So my thought on that question is that the incremental company value generated by co-innovation projects can depend on, of course, the base revenue you're working from or the size of the company, and also, of course, the differentiation or the differentiating value proposition that the solution generates. So, but I'd like to tap into what Dave and Rich think about the results of this survey now. Is it in line with what your thoughts are on what it would be?
I think sort of yes and no. I think this is pretty typical, and it looks to me like many of our audience members are aiming too low. The overhead and effort in a major co-innovation project basically isn't worth it for a $5 million goal. And I'd say aim higher. Now, one thing I have seen a lot is that people take what's a big idea, and in order to get it through their internal processes, they kind of dumb it down or simplify it. So you get a disconnect between the sort of vision and the actual plan and proof points. This is an area where the formulation phase can be very, very important. And that's a very dangerous thing to do. It makes small ideas. It's hard to get executive backing of that, and often companies give the value away. So it's a sort of flight to mediocrity. So I would encourage everyone to think about what the big idea is, and I think you'll be more successful with fewer bigger ideas than with a lot of little ones. Rich, you have any comments?
Well, I think Leo mentioned that, the size of the opportunity is relating as well to your company size. So as you can imagine, with HP at 130 billion and Shell over 400, we're looking for significantly larger revenue opportunities than a lot of the group here. But again, that's relative to our company size. But I do really resonate with your comment, David, that the co-innovation vision, I mentioned this as a success factor, is most powerful if it's the real game-changing vision. And then that doesn't mean you have to rush to commit or invest the full amount on behalf of that, on behalf of that huge win. But that does create a lot more energy and helps recruit, helps fund, and so forth. And then the proof points along the way can then be the guidepost to the investors within the companies as to whether or not you're on track to get there. So just a different way to manage the risk, I think.
Yeah, I would encourage people to look in their ideas, those who said 5 and 10 million, and see if there's a big idea hiding in there trying to get out, and make that clearer and stronger, and step up and see if you can really do something with it.
Awesome. So do we have the results of another polling question? Okay, so this one is, what part of your process most needs improvement? And the winner is, let's see, all of the above. Okay. Makes sense, David?
Yeah. I also see the second runner-up, though, is the formulation part. And I think this makes a lot of sense, particularly when you look at the previous question. The formulation part is a lot more work than people realize. And there's an assumption they sort of get the right person and you just kind of go, and you learn as you go. And while there is a certain gem of truth in there, without a structure around it, it's really very difficult to move things forward and to drive that large vision, to get people aligned, and so on. And also, the more partners you have, the more important it is to get alignment across disparate organizations. I know Rich has a lot of direct experience with that, and Rich?
Yeah, I think the formulate is kind of like, I guess, analogous to some sort of a team sport. That's the play you design, the week before the game, and you kind of rehearse as a team, and you come out of the locker room, and that's the play you're going to run, and then you get onto the field and you adjust from there. But it creates a lot of confidence in the team and a lot of confidence with the investors and the partners that we came out, rehearsed and ready to run a play, and we're heads up now on the playing field and seeing what's actually happening, and we're able to adjust from there. And, maybe halftime is the reformulate step. We say, okay, that didn't quite work. Let's make an adjustment. But so it's not to say, stick with a rigid plan since you've formulated it. It's really about, having a play that you can run and then adjusting from there.
Rich, we have a question for you here. How well does the process work if co-innovation requires multiple partners?
This is, I think, a real opportunity area because we've used it extensively internally, and where you've got different stakeholders, different businesses that are needing to come together, or different functional groups. You've got your R&D team, your finance team, operations, and so on. All of which have different sort of worldviews on how to move a new business project forward. So then you layer on top of that working with an outside partner or multiple outside partners. And I think the only caution I have is to make sure that there's sort of sufficient transparency and openness between the partners, because this is going to be a very open, creative, sort of challenging discussion where you want to have the ability to challenge ideas and think broadly and think openly. So assuming you have that type of a relationship and a culture with your partner, I think it's a fantastic way to go, because everybody can then see sort of the different trains of thinking and how those came together into the final formulated strategy. So it's a great way to build trust, alignment, and really deepen your understanding and your relationship. Just make sure that that the partnership is ready for that step.
Awesome. David, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, maybe just one comment. I think many organizations are, while they're aligned on some high-level common objectives, are tribal or siloed, and I think many of the same issues around resolving conflict apply in an organization as well as between organizations. So this very much works within and without, or if you have multiple organizations. It's really a matter of how intense or how much heat there is in the process as you move to a more complex structure. But the basic principles are absolutely the same.
Excellent. Another question that came in, David, does the framework and lessons work for innovation more generally?
Absolutely. I think that we kind of hit that with the last question. There are you could call it the content issues that you have to deal with here, like figuring out what to do and understanding your proof points and developing good incubations and learning plans and finding a committee. All that stuff has to be true for any innovation. There are also the organizational complexity difficulties around either parts of an organization that may or may not be totally aligned, or silos, or even separate formal organizations. You call this sort of the social organizational complexity. And this process, I think, deals well with both of those. It's really a matter of degree, not a difference in kind.
Very good.
Rich, do you have any comments? I think you've actually used this process in less grand situations.
Absolutely. It's the same thought process of, in effect, a formulated stage or an innovation stage is sort of pulling the future into today. And so this is a mental model and a way of thinking about the future and putting it into present terms and then being able to walk towards that future in a disciplined manner. So I think any problem that lends itself to that kind of a future enablement in today is very much can benefit from this approach.
Yeah, I think you've done like a dozen or more.
Or more.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, guys, that's all the time we have right now for the Q&A portion, or for at least this part of the Q&A portion. All registrants from today's e-broadcast will receive a credit voucher of $250 towards an upcoming Frost & Sullivan Executive Mind Exchange. And we'll be in touch with you shortly so that you can redeem your credit. Now, if you submitted any questions that were not answered during the e-broadcast, someone will follow up with you shortly. If you missed any part of this e-broadcast or you want to share it with others, you can access the on-demand version, and that's available at www.frost.com/partnership. I want to thank each of you for joining us today. Frost & Sullivan recognizes that the solutions being covered could be of great value to you, so SmartOrg will stay on for a few minutes now to demonstrate the best practices presented in this e-broadcast. this demo may inspire some improvements within your own organization, so please stay on for this informative discussion. I also want to thank our audience and panelists for their active participation, and I do recommend that you stay with us. I'm going to turn it over now to David Matheson, co-founder, president, and CEO at SmartOrg. So, David, can you take us through the demo?
Yes, of course. I want to talk about the formulation and reformulation stage, give some more examples of that, how that works, and also a platform called Portfolio Navigator that really helps innovation partners in managing this complex or confusing area of formulation and reformulation. And I kind of picked this in a way. I'm delighted that the polling question showed that formulation was the #1 area for improvement. So this is really directly responsive to the major concern. So what we're going to talk about is this formulation and reformulation part here. And I've got a little example here that I made up to show how this kind of works. So here's an ideation phase result. Solar Stuff Corporation and T-Wares Inc. Have this idea of making a solar kettle. They want to boil water in seconds without using electric power, a nice, elegant design, and they think it has strong appeal to the green movement. And so they get this far. They have strong champions. There's a tea aficionado in Solar Stuff who really wants to make this happen, and T-Wares is trying to get into technology, and so they're really committed to making this go. And so they start running down and start with their first designs and so on, and they pretty quickly come to a clash. That is, there's a conflict between the elegant design envisioned by T-Ware on the left and what's really required from an engineering perspective to get the boiling efficiency, which is an ugly teapot with a giant solar array on it. So what are they going to do? And there's a natural tendency in this sort of situation to think this is just kind of conflict and you need to power through or apply power or escalate or something like that to get this going. But in the formulate phase, you take a sort of different approach. I find that many conflicts like this are actually a symptom of different assumptions that are unspoken about many things, but in particular about what the decisions are that need to be made, what the trade-offs need to be made, and so on. And so typically in a kind of workshop setting, although not necessarily, the key issue is how do you get people talking about their different decisions and the different choices they have. And here's an example from Portfolio Navigator. It's a web-based platform that helps manage this whole process. And you can see there's a format called a strategy table here in the middle where the orange and blue bar are. The gray bar at the top is showing you some major customers that they have. And so T-Ware, of course, is implicitly thinking of the tea aficionado, and Solar Stuff is implicitly thinking of the solar enthusiast, and they're trying to drive towards the design of those folks. But the fact is it's a choice in this new business about what segments or what customers they're really going to go for. And if you start to unpack that, you realize that the companies are making different assumptions about the channel. T-Ware wants to send to the high-end tea shops, and Solar Stuff wants to sell on the Whole Earth Catalog 2.0 out on the Internet. And as they discuss this, maybe Solar Stuff starts to realize that the Internet sale is probably not really a coherent business strategy in a way for this, as well as T-Ware may be loosening up that the tea aficionado may or may not be the best target. There's some features priority, elegant design, fast boiling. That's a decision, again, but helping the strategy table helps people become aware of that. And then there's a price point, whether you're paying a premium for this beautiful pot or a sort of parity price for other kind of solar technologies. So the step of getting people to talk about their decisions, getting them recorded, and then integrating them, which I've shown here in the rows, T-Ware had an assumption about a sort of momentum strategy that they wanted to do, and Solar Stuff had a different momentum strategy. And the good news is they ran into conflict early and were able to surface that as a choice. So part of the thing in the formulation phase is to understand those choices and how you're going to learn or come to understand what is really the winning strategy. And it's almost never one of the ones that one of the partners starts up. Now, in order to make this work, you need some kind of objective framework for understanding value, because at the end of the day, this is going to be a business decision, and the implications for the economics are pretty important. And so this is a technology called a value map, these sort of bubbles and arrows. And it says that they're going to be looking at picking things based on some kind of project value, which is a function of timing, investment, probability of success, and contribution if successful. And the way they're going to calculate that, or the kinds of evidence and the standards of evidence they need to bring, have to do with the sorts of things you think in this simple example: market size, products, shares, costs, and how it evolves through various phases. The key thing, though, is to get the partners to talk about what are the sources of information that they're going to use, what are the standards of evidence, and how information is going to have to come together. And Portfolio Navigator can help provide a platform for that, as well as use that value map then as an active tool to guide the gathering of information, the assessment of information, and the decision-making around direction. So let me just take one example here around market size. And this is something people are fundamentally uncertain about. And so Solar Stuff and T-Ware have decided to treat this as a source of uncertainty. And in particular, they're going to look in this particular example at the solar enthusiasts who like tea. So this is more the solar momentum strategy. And of course, the Solar Stuff company are quite enthusiastic. And so they start with a discussion of the high side. Let's be optimistic about this. And Solar Stuff comes out and says, solar enthusiasts everywhere. They tend to be green people, and greens like tea. So really, this is the whole world. And because of the way this is framed, now T-Ware is in a position to say, well, you know, a lot of that could be true, and we're willing to be optimistic and look at the upside. But in a way, there's some excessive optimism there. We happen to know, because we're tea experts, that solar enthusiasts like coffee, but they have a lot of tea-drinking friends. So maybe to get to the upside, we'll agree that if we can get to the solar enthusiasts and their tea-drinking friends, then that is a pretty good opportunity. Maybe there are 200 million possible customers. And so that helps paint a vision both of what you're trying to achieve as something exciting and big, but also tempers excessive optimism and makes it more constructive. Now, the same kind of tempering or understanding also works on the downside. That is, if things don't work out, if we can't get to the market, what does that mean? And so here's the discussion of a more pessimistic view of the solar enthusiasts who like teas. And so Solar Stuff says, well, only committed solar tea lovers. So there's a core group of solar tea lovers. And we're actually worried about the nuclear coffee pot. It's actually more efficient from an engineering point of view. It could really take off, and that would cut into our thing because it doesn't use any external electricity, although it has problems, but that would be a big problem for us if it did take on. And T-Ware here agrees, right? There is a strong core of tea lovers among the green group, and maybe we can move out of solar into green, and so they agree that the downside here is 85. So they actually have a pretty big range of uncertainty around the size of the market here, from 200 million to 85 million. And one thing that does is when you move to the middle, the base, or the kind of base scenario you're going to be using with, they can agree pretty quickly at 100 million, and they use this fairly simple method. They combine the tea monthly estimate of tea drinkers with the solar quarterly estimate of the solar penetration rate and come up with 100 million. Now, one problem many companies get into in this phase is that if they don't do something like this, they come up with a base case, and then they end up arguing about their assumptions for the base case and a kind of false precision. So is it 100, is it 110, is it 95? And a lot of time can be wasted there. But you can see, given the total range of uncertainty, that it doesn't really matter what you pick as long as it's sort of in that zone of around 100. You can also see what information they need to research or what possibilities they need to make happen in order to drive the upside or protect the downside. In particular, there may be access through the tea-drinking friends, and so you could start to inquire about what to do with that. Now, in Portfolio Navigator, it helps you through this process by providing here a platform for analysis that's available to the various participants. And here you can see the range of uncertainty for the market size from 85, 100, 200, some basis of assessment on the workshop results, and who made the various changes so you can track and keep understand where the information comes from. And the Portfolio Navigator converts that template into a list of all the factors, whether they be ranges or constants or whatever you need to do to make that work. Now, Portfolio Navigator will also drive the analysis. So if you do take this base case and assume that the 100 occurs and all the other base values happen there, it produces a life cycle NPV. So you can see here is your your cash flow as you have to invest in this product, and there's the launch, and then it starts to generate revenue, ramps up, product life, and product decline for an NPV of $17.61 million. Of course, we know that $17.61 million is not going to happen. And the interesting question is, what drives this value? What makes it go up and what makes it go down? And this is a different kind of analysis called a tornado diagram that helps people focus on the uncertainty here. The factors in the value map run down the left, and the scale of NPV is across the top. And so in the middle here, we have the 17.61. That's the vertical line that occurs when all these factors have their middle value. Now, if you move the base product market size to 85, the bottom end of the range, the value goes to about 15. But if the market size goes up to 200, you can see this gets to be a 45 million NPV idea. And you can also see that that is by far the largest uncertainty here. There are other areas around, say, the margin of the product in the SolarWare strategy, or the exact share they get, that just, while they're uncertain, they matter less at this point in the development. So the formulation and the learning plan needs to focus on how do you drive that upside. And that, if you can achieve that upside, it actually takes what's a fairly mediocre idea into a much more exciting one. Going back to the range of uncertainty, those solar enthusiast friends, there's a broader community out here, and how do we reach those people, and who are they? Now, you can also analyze, and in this case they did, we analyzed the strategy of the T-Ware, and that's here shown in orange. And on the face of it, a couple things come out, is that the T-Ware strategy isn't as good, primarily because the market is too small. But if you look at the big uncertainty in theirs, it is that margin. And so how do you get that margin, thinking about going after this other kind of segments? And one way of looking at that is, where do you sell, where people expect to pay that sort of thing, something T-Ware is very good at. And so this analysis and this process has helped people focus on the questions that are going to really drive the upside. And so here's some incubation activities, some things they need to work on the proof for. So what users care about time to boil, and how many of them are there, and where are they? And that was essentially the original conflict. But other questions come out is, where can we reach the largest group? Where do these friends actually buy? And what are the price expectations in those channels? So maybe we should go to a channel where people do expect premium pricing. And then finally, can we find a technical approach to faster boil times with smaller solar arrays? So this now becomes the learning plan and the key proof points to drive forward the incubation. During the incubation, we have some findings. First of all, if it doesn't boil in under 5 minutes, it's not a viable product. And so this is really essential. It's a kind of zero or nothing. So that resolves some of these basic questions. Where can you reach the largest groups? It turns out that maybe these people actually shop at traditional luxury retail, at high-end malls and places like this, and you can get the prices you need there. So it's a completely different channel. And then the technical folks have realized that they don't have to power the teapot from the sun directly, but rather it can store energy, and so then they can boil very quickly, and so they need to move down a technology platform based more on batteries. So they bring this back together and say, well, what have we learned, and let's now reformulate. Well, they've learned a couple things. Looking at the updated strategy table, there are some additional decisions. The method that the thing is going to be used, part of the experience. T-Ware was really implicitly assuming that people liked the lengthy boiling experience while they talked about how great their tea was going to be. Solar stuff was put in the sun, it boils fast, and the new one is it lives in the sun, and then when you need it, you pull it in and use the stored power to boil it. The technology assumptions were the solar arrays, and now they've added this battery idea. And they've also, through their work in the incubation, changed their target customer to the busy tea drinker. They're thinking about selling in luxury retail, and they want to go for a more utilitarian design and get that premium pricing. And so that's kind of how the formulation, reformulation works, and how a portfolio navigator can help make it happen. So coming to this new strategy and real alignment around it, it's time to celebrate and, of course, develop the next proof points, because what you can expect is that it's formulation and reformulation, and being mindful and intentional about what you learn and what decisions you're really trying to inform is essential to taking an opportunity, driving it forward, winning an executive sport, and making it a big success. So I've showed you now how Portfolio Navigator is an essential tool in successful formulation and reformulation. Leo, back to you.
Oh, thanks a lot, David. That was a really awesome demonstration, but your work is not done because we have some questions for you. And the first one is, what are the typical decisions that need to be addressed in a partnership on the strategy table?
Oh, that's a great question, and I think the first thing to say is that the key to this is finding the decisions that matter to you. What are the choice points that are really going to define your direction and are really going to clarify how to make your idea really, really big? But typically they fall into some categories. So usually channel is a big issue, and often one that people don't realize. Companies will make assumptions about the channel based on their historical success, and often putting that on the table as an explicit one is good. The target customer, another area where people make a lot of assumptions, and getting clear and refined around that is good. Most innovators often start with, well, we're going to be everything to everybody, and understand the segmentation is good. There's usually something about technology or method, you might say, of supporting it, sort of illustrated here with this battery complexity in the case I just gave. And finally, there's often one around the business model. That is, how you get paid. Is it a service model, or is it a straightforward purchase model? It wasn't illustrated in my example, but those four are pretty common to think about, and when you look for the decision areas that really matter in your partnership.
Excellent. But who provides the information behind the ranges? That's another question we've had here.
Yeah. Well, so the key is that the information comes from or is owned by the folks who are actually doing the project. So it typically comes out of discussions. And yet those discussions need to be informed by real quality research and information. So typically the sources start with fairly high-level secondary research kinds of sources, and people's perspectives and opinions about what could change things in the future. Then as you research further the topics that are at the top of the Trinity diagram, you start to develop much more specific and primary knowledge around the key questions. And you do it in the context of the partnership and of the plan. So the information is much more readily owned by folks, and you end up with a kind of open environment or maybe a sense of inquiry where you're really working together to figure out what is going to make this thing great. Rich may have some additional comments on that because he's experienced this quite a bit on both these questions about the information and the typical decisions.
I think you did a great job describing that. It's really, the formulate stage is really what are the key decisions that the team is facing now that really affect the business model and affect the viability of the strategy. And so I think even though the process generates a lot of different things that can go into the strategy table, it also winnows it down as quickly as possible to those 6 to 8 to 10 things, choice point areas that really are the critical decisions at this point in the business.
Okay. But how do you guys track when the vision or the information changes? How's that done?
Well, so Portfolio Navigator is a web-based tool, and as information changes, it's pretty easy to put it in and do comparisons among the evaluations, look at alternative strategies. So in terms of the kind of technical element of this, the Portfolio Navigator platform is really, really helpful. But it also has to be used in the context, I think, of managerial meetings and a process, and I think Rich talked about this in his original remarks about the importance of really being with your customer, with your partner, and working through the tough issues. And so the Portfolio Navigator gives you a kind of dashboard for that to help drive those conversations and to keep the partnership on the topics that really matter and sort of out of the weeds.
Rich, did you want to add anything to that?
you can update real time. I think we tend to update when we're coming up to major checkpoints in the life cycle, or if you're in the middle of a phase and you've received a key part of learning has not been proven. So you've disproved something that really is fundamental. Then you can sort of call to reformulate at any point. So it's sort of either major checkpoint driven or event based if it's something really significant. And I think one of the important things about the learning plan and the formulate reformulate thinking is that the core leadership team is always has their eyes on the ball, so to speak, about what are the things that are really important for this business to go forward as we've designed it to. And so they're quicker to see things that really aren't shaping up. You get a negative proof quicker in many cases than you get your ultimate proof, which is success in the market. But that getting a negative proof early allows the team time to adjust and utilize the resources and investments effectively in the near term to make the adjustments.
Okay. Well, on behalf of Frost & Sullivan, I want to thank David and also Rich for agreeing to join us for this additional time. It was a very interesting and useful demo, and based on the number of questions we've had, it seems that our audience also agrees with that. So thanks again, everybody. This is Leo O'Connor with Frost & Sullivan signing off.